Agreed. So let's get Elad in here. Elad, welcome. Welcome back.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for creating this amazing day. It's been moving to see to hear all the talks. I've been trying to switch tracks and like hear things in like fast forward so I could like catch up. But I'm gonna make sure to catch up all of the talks later.
Excellent. Now, do you have a screen that you're going to be sharing during this?
Oh yeah. I forgot to do that. Let me see. Yep.
All right. And again, while we wait for a moment, I want to give a big shout out to all of our interpreters today. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. We really love you guys. This has added, I think, a lot to our CDK day, and we couldn't obviously have done this without you. So thank you again for being here. So without any further ado, let's get Elad's screen up here, and it is all yours.
Cool. So we're gonna do two parts for this talk. You guys asked that I'd spend some time talking a little bit about where we are with the CDK, and so the first thing. So that's going to be the second part of the talk. First thing, I wanted to do something a little play a little bit with Projen. And it's not going to be a talk about Projen. I don't even know what Projen is still. I'm still discovering a little bit. Every time there's some new use cases and some new crazy usage for it. And in a sense, I'm more and more realizing that Projen is kind of like the CDK for everything. Or in a sense, it's kind of like a basic foundation for CDKs. Because in today's software as infrastructure as code world and GitOps world, everything is source code. Everything is in your repository. And so in a sense, Projen is a CDK for generating files that go into your repository, and it has some nice very simple but useful tools for generating and synthesizing files into your repository. And so I wanted to like stretch that a little bit and see what we can do with generating, this a very specific type of file, which is the source code that's in your repository. Projen has been really good at like generating all these config files and workflows and things like that. And none of those are source, but source is also files in your repo. And so I wanted to like see what I can do with that and maybe just inspire some people to like build very cool things with this. I don't know. We'll see. Don't try this at home without really understanding what the use case is. And so it's more like a game than something very concrete. And then it was very funny to like hear this conversation about like how do you pronounce Projen, and to be honest, I'm not a native English speaker, and so I really didn't have that distinction between Projen and Projen. It's very funny. It's very fun to like think about it, and I don't even know what gen is for. Is it for generator or? But yeah, I guess like the most fun names are the ones that make us talk about them. So in that sense, it's a good name. Okay, let's just code. And again, as soon as I finish this, I'm going to jump over to another presentation and talk a little bit about where we are with the CDK, what are we up to, what are we thinking about for the future. And if we'll have some time at the end, I'm happy to take more questions if there are any. Okay, so I actually did something that I shouldn't have done and literally released a new version for Projen 5 minutes ago, which is probably the worst idea ever in demo land. But I think it gives people a little bit of a sense of like how experimental Projen is. And again, I know that people are using it for real world things, and I've seen a few amazing talks about it, and we're talking with the community a lot about it. But it is important for me to mention that Projen is still in very early stage, and it's changing very rapidly. I'm trying as much as possible. We're trying as much as possible not to break things like dramatically between releases, but we're releasing every commit. which means that there could be some mishaps, and we're trying to like revert them and things like that. And I'm hoping that this release 5 minutes ago would not have been a mishap. What I did is basically add support for CDK v2, because we have just announced CDK v2 developer preview, and I was thinking, well, we should probably have support for Projen in v2, but if it doesn't work, I can just like I'll figure it out. So I'll just create a directory and basically go on and start by creating an AWS CDK TypeScript up. No post means that it won't run yarn after it creates Projen. I like to do that because then I can open my ID. And then I can also do something like this and specify the RC1 CDK version v2. And so hopefully that's going to work. I'm going to kick off my IDE, and in the meantime, I'm going to install yarn here. And what's going on here? Unable to resolve. Let's do this once more. Oh yeah, it needed to install all the stuff. Yeah, my shortcuts are always biting me in the okay, but in the meantime, I can still open like my project and just see how it looks like. The main difference between V1 and V2, if you will actually take your V1 project and change it to a 2.0 version, is that there's a single dependency for the CDK, which is the AWS CDK lib dependency, so this one. And then you also need constructs at 10 and above. And the reason we named it 10 is because constructs are not going to get any major versions from now on. I mean, famous last words, I guess, but hopefully constructs are not going to get any major versions anymore. So all changes are going to be backwards compatible. And that is really important for this interoperability thing that we talked about earlier. Okay, so this is my Projen project. It's just a CDK application. It doesn't have anything unique about it. But then I wanted to show you this new feature we have in Projen called Watch. And it's what you would expect. It basically just like watches your project and resynthesizes your project files as you change your Projen file. And it's pretty cute because you can like literally see what Projen is doing for your project. So you can do something like, oh, let's edit this description. And then immediately it synthesizes your changes, or you can change your, oh, this is bad. This is probably gonna, anyway, it automatically synthesizes any changes, and you can see that happening. And so if I, for example, if I like remove Mergify from my project, then you can see that my Mergify file was erased, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a nice way to interactively use Projen, which is not, might be good for like developing Projen stuff, but it's really nice for what I'm gonna show you right now. And so let's talk about some use case for code generation. And that use case, the use case that I want to talk about is I want to create a model, like a data model, and then also put this data in a DynamoDB and interact with this data from like a lambda function. So it's a pretty common use case. I think Eric's talk even had something very similar to that. And so I wanted to show how code generation can reduce the amount of boilerplate required in order to do something that's very common, that you do a lot. And so a data model, you would normally start from a schema, right? Like some kind of an interface. And so for example, let's say I want to create a data model for a user. It would look something like this. Right, name, last name, and then I guess username would be like my key, right? So this is a simple model for user, and so I can write that by hand, but and that's okay. It's actually a really concise definition, and it gives me a lot of power. But maybe it actually gives me a little bit too much power, because data models, especially ones that are going to store into something like DynamoDB, have constraints, and so like the surface area that TypeScript gives me here might be a little too large. And so instead of, but that's anyway, instead of doing that by hand, let's try to do it using Projen. And so Projen has this new component called source code. And what it does is basically generates a text file in your project. So I can do something like this, for example. Let me delete this file so it's not gonna yell at me. And as soon as I save this, I can see that I have a new file called user. Let's open it up here. And then I can do something like, the API for source code is very low level, right? It's basically kind of like the L0 for source code. And so I can like emit lines, hello. And I can also open and close blocks. So it'll basically maintain some indentation across blocks, which is a very common thing to do with source code. And so the first thing that I want to emit here is actually what we call the Projen marker. File-based Projen marker. And that's this little string that Projen is using to identify Projen files that are no longer maintained by Projen. Because when I change this file name, for example, I need Projen to erase the old file and create a new file. And so the only way for Projen to identify things that are not modeled in the application is by is through a reductive way, right? He's, oh, just remove all the files in this directory that have not been generated by Projen, and you'll see those markers everywhere in the Projen world. And so, but since source code is a general purpose source code thing, we couldn't add like this marker automatically. So let's create one for TypeScript. So I'll just use a function, TypeScript TS file, and then path would be something like that. I'm just keeping it really concise. And then this would be src, and then the path here would be, just path, and return src. And now I can just create a TypeScript file by doing src user.ts and src whatever project. And you see that those files are now created. OK, so I've got my basic building block for creating files. Now, let's create a function that's called entity. And an entity is in our data model. An entity would have like a name, and then the key, the name of the field that represents the key or the primary key in DynamoDB, and then a bunch of fields. And then from that entity, I can do something like entity username, and then in our example, it was like name and last name, and whatever, phone number. And let's say all of them are strings, right? Keep it super simple. And so now, OK, so I created this entity. You see this user thing was deleted because I didn't create the file yet. OK, so I'm going to start generating a file. So now I need to do TypeScript, src, let's call it base name dash model, or maybe even base name slash model. That would be nice. So this will be the model. And so let's close this one. And now I have a directory called user with a model file. OK, so now let's start generating this interface. So export interface name. And you see, this is how I use this open and close thing. And I know that it's not as, could be nicer, but I guess with like some lambda or something. But now I need a closing thing here. And the nice thing about this interactive watch is that I can literally use my IDE I get like IDE completion used in the code generation. I get like errors and things like that. OK, so I need the key here as a field, and I need what else do I need? I need for each field. To emit an entry, field string, something like that. Cool. And I can even do this, right? Amazing. And you see the power of this obviously already, but I can easily add another another field here, and it's just gonna go here. And if I want to standardize some things like naming or comments and default values or whatever, right? Like if I want to standardize any of those things, I can really do it in a central way, because again, it goes back to this whole philosophy about the CDK being a meta programming paradigm, where you can basically write code in order to synthesize something, or synthesize configuration templates, synthesize files, synthesize configuration. And by being able to write code, you can think about things at a higher order, or at a higher level. Okay, so I've got my user. I made all those optional, because the only thing that's required is the username, and then the rest is just as an opinion. Okay, so now let's talk about the Dynamo table. Okay, here's my CDK application. I'm going to want to do something like new Dynamo table, but for the user. And so I'm going to generate another file next to the model file, which will represent my table, my construct. And that's going to look like ts src base name table, I guess. Cool. Let's put it here. And then this file will be basically a construct. So it's going to be open export class name table extends DynamoDB table and close. And then I will need to import the DynamoDB module, and I'm going to do that since I'm using CDK v2. It's going to look like import as DynamoDB from AWS CDK lib / AWS DynamoDB. And you'll see we actually intentionally organized v2 so that the only difference basically from an import perspective in TypeScript, and in other languages it's not very different, is this, right? Like this is v1 and this is v2. So technically, migrating your code from v1 to v2 should require to do that. I think that there's also going to be some tooling that does that automatically for you. I don't know if it's going to be available for all the languages, but okay. So now I'm going to need a constructor, scope ID, and and then table line super scope ID, and then here I need the props. So it's going to be open, I guess, and table close. And this is using a very low level source code construct, or a very low level source code class. You could imagine a whole high-level API for generating source code in different languages, or even multiple languages, where we can model the abstract syntax tree as constructs, as classes, and basically use them together to generate source code. So I'm using a very low-level thing just to make that demo really easy and approachable, and also because I don't have these high-level libraries yet, I think people can get the idea. Okay, so what's here? Oh, the order, of course. And so you see this interactive thing. I'm really excited by this interactive thing, because I feel like one of the challenges with code generation sometimes is that you really lose all the power of your IDE, and by having that interactive feedback, you can literally just use your IDE to say, oh, I need the partition key here. Okay, partition key. And then the name of it I know is ID, and the type is going to be DynamoDB attribute type string. And then let's see what's happening here. Some error. Oh, ID. No, it was key, and that has to be string actually. Okay, cool. And now I need a comma here. So this looks like, obviously there could be a lot of stuff, other stuff in it, but this is basically the basis of the user table. I just need a table with a partition key based on the same in the same key. And so now I can use this thing, right? It's code in my project, which is pretty nice. I can just do user table here, import it, and then do new user table, this user table, and that's it. And I guess if I synthesize my CDK application, we should be able to see the table with the key and with everything that's neat. Okay, so far it's pretty nice. I have my model and I have a Dynamo table, but now I want to interact with my my Dynamo table through a lambda function. So let's bring in the notoriously amazing Node.js lambda module. And create a lambda function, Node.js function, this, whatever, create user. And the entry point will be, oh, sorry, what did I do wrong? Node.js function, check. Oh, it's like lowercase. Node.js function, and then the entry point would be create user TS. And then I'm going to create my little thing here, create user TS, async function handler event. And actually, the event, I can use my model, right? Let's say the event that I'm expecting my lambda function to accept is the user model. And here is where I'm going to need to write some AWS SDK code to put item into my DynamoDB. And you've all done that like a million times. You'd need to instantiate the AWS SDK's DynamoDB client and then put an item. And then you need to somehow like transfer the table name from my construction code to my runtime code. And obviously, all of that is going to be loosely typed, right? Because the name of the key is something that I don't know here. And so to that end, we're going to synthesize another file we'll call a client. And so I'm going to get back to my Projen file, and that's going to be the client file. And the client file is going to look like this. And that's going to actually be a little bit tedious, but that's where actually a lot of the value is. Okay, so I've started this. I'm going to put that here so I can like see what I'm doing. And then open export class name client. And then I'm going to need, sorry, let's close. I'm going to need the AWS. Okay, basically I'm going to need to do something like public async put item, and then item column name. So that's going to be basically the API that I want here. Why did I do this? Not sure. Okay, and in order to implement this API, I need the AWS SDK. So I'm going to import it here. And obviously, it's not installed in my project. Oh, it is installed. No, it's not installed in my project, I think. Right? Yeah, it's not part of my project dependencies. So I can literally do that here, which is I think pretty interesting to like think about the power of being able to like create a self-contained component, right? This component called entity is something that I can publish to a package manager. And the user who uses that component doesn't need to know that they need to install some dependency. It could be the SDK, could be any other dependency. As far as they're concerned, they're just using this entity thing, and it'll go in and install this thing into their project. So it's a very powerful notion. This ability to basically reach out to different parts of your code base or your repo and basically do whatever it needs to be done, because those things are always coupled together. They're not disconnected. This disconnect that sometimes we see is mostly from a mechanical reason. It's kind of like the disconnect between runtime code and infrastructure code that was originating from the fact that we use JSON files or YAML files to define our infrastructure. So we felt that there's this humongous barrier between those two things, but there wasn't really. Like once we put everything in code, suddenly we saw that these things are really very strongly coupled, and there's a lot of power in expressing that coupling using programming languages. Anyway, enough ranting. Okay, so I now need to. I'm just going to do it backwards. So it's going to be return. Okay, I need the client. So let's add the client. Line read-only client equals new AWS. I actually can bring in the DynamoDB here directly because I don't need anything else. I can do this. Cool. And now I can do this dot client dot put item request dot prompts. I always like to put the request outside so I can like so it's easier to work with. Oh, and I also need to import the model file name from model. Nice, because it's local. I know the name is model, and obviously the order is wrong. Okay, so now let's try and do that quickly because that's going to take a little bit. Okay, so request is of type. What is the type? Put item input. DynamoDB put item input equals open. Heavy on the programming today. I hope people have managed to like stay up and keep up. Okay, so now let's see what I need. I need table name and item. So table name is something that I would actually need to bring in from like some environment variable. So let's give this environment variable a name. Call it env. And it's going to be basically name to uppercase table, table name. I'll just put it here. And then here I can do line table name process env. And since it could technically be null, I need to do this. Okay, cool. So I've got table name, and now I need the item. So the item would be item attributes. I'm going to fill them out previously. Okay, so I'm slowly doing that. That's how I would program it, for, like myself without any code generation or anything like that. I'm always going to go from the bottom. Okay, so now I'm going to need something like const attributes, and this is, I think, of put item attribute map. So this is basically kind of like a placeholder. And then the first thing I'm going to need to do is attributes dot name. That's the primary key, which has to exist. Is going to be item dot name, right? And then for all the other fields, I need to actually make sure. Oh, not name, key. And then for all of the other things, I actually need to like check if they're not null, because they could be null. So I'm going to do for const field of fields client open if item key is not null, then attributes key equals s item key. Boom. Why key? Field. Nice. And so this is all of this is basically boilerplate that I should have written in my Lambda function, because that's how I need to write this. There's no other way. And so last thing I want to do is basically use this in my Lambda function, which you may expect, is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to import my user client from here, and I'm going to have some Hebrew letters, and then user client, and then async await dot put item, and then this actually accepts a user thing. So I'm just going to pass it event, and that's it. The last remaining piece is to bind this environment variable to my Lambda function. And so I'm just going to do it real fast because I'm really running out of time. And what I want to do is the way I'm going to do it is not I'm not sure that's the most elegant way, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to add another method here that says bind, and then it'll accept a handler of type lambda function. Sorry, function. And then, and I'm going to need to import lambda here as well. And then what it'll do is basically do handler add environment env this dot table name. So it's basically binding, but it's all behind the scenes. And so the beauty of this is that the user, all they need to do, and it could also do something like table. It also can do something like this table grant read write to handler, unless if that makes sense from a policy perspective. Not this table, just this. Read write data. Of course. Okay, and so now in my main function, I would basically need to do something like handler and then users, and then I'm going to be users.bind handler. And that's it. I guess the last thing to maybe do, I don't know if that's even important, because I think the message, the point that I wanted to get through is this experience eventually, right? Like now I want to add another entity. I want to do something like, oh, let's add an entity called a project, and then I can do ID, project ID as the thing, and then the name, description. And I can just do it like this. I've added this project thing, and now I have this like model. I have a client library for it. I have a project for a construct for it. And so if I look at the CDK out directory, let's just do that real quick. I can see that's not, is that the one? My stack dev? That sounds like a wrong name. Maybe that's the name. Anyway, I've got the right policy here for read and write. I've got my lambda function with the environment variable of bound to the thing. I've got my table with the primary key. And I've got my bundled Node.js function that includes the client library and my code. And it doesn't include the SDK because the Lambda Node.js module actually knows to not include it because it's already installed on Lambda. That's it, I guess, for this part. Let me say hi. By the way, Jonathan, thank you so much for interpreting. I love that you guys are all doing this this time.